Welcome to Smokin with Gary. If you found this show because you want to learn how to barbecue the right way, you're in the right place. If you're looking for shortcuts, microwave tricks, or someone telling you to boil your ribs in Dr. Pepper, you might want to turn it off. This is not for you, because the fire don't lie, and neither do I. I'm Gary, and today we're talking barbecue. Not Instagram barbecue, not competition barbecue, not that rapid and full of prey nonsense. I'm talking real barbecue, the kind that takes time, patience, and a little humility.
Smokin with Gary, the pitmaster king, teaching you the magic, the barbecue swing. Recipes, wisdom, and a smoky good time. Light it up, it's Gary's shine.
Before we get going here, I would like to welcome you to the first ever Smokin with Gary podcast. I'd love it if you would share and let people know about it. Help me get out there. I will be teaching a lot of barbecue stuff. Some of the stuff maybe, things that people want to learn or do it on a budget, with our economy the way it is. Sooner or later, we'll have some TikTok videos up of some of the things that I do. We had a little bit of snow, kind of back me up on that. I don't mind cooking in the snow, but I want to make sure that, on our videos that they're high quality and teach as much as we can. And so that's why I didn't do the videos while it was snowing, but keep watching. We'll have TikToks. You can watch me on Facebook, YouTube, and then the TikToks will be on Facebook and TikTok as well. If you have any suggestions on something you'd like to see us talk about on the show, feel free to message me, email me, leave a comment, DM. It doesn't matter. This podcast is here to help you. So whatever you want to see, get with me and let's talk about it. And if you want to be a guest on the show, reach out to us. Let's see what we can do. Without anything else being said about it, let's go ahead and get into why you're here. Let's learn what we're talking about today. Episode 1, we're going to be talking about, basics of barbecue. We're going to be talking about a lot of the smoke, because smoke is such a huge factor, but let's get into it. Okay. So first things first, this is one of the biggest things that people, really don't think about when it comes to barbecue is barbecue ain't cooking. Let's clear something up. Barbecue is not cooking. Cooking is what you do in a hurry. Barbecue is management. You're managing a fire. You're managing your meat. You're managing your own bad decisions when you want to rush it. And if you don't respect that, the pit will embarrass you in front of your friends. I've seen it happen. When you have friends over and you're barbecuing, you might be a good cook. There's a difference between good and elite barbecue and smoking meats and all of that. I know you've been to your friends' houses and you've seen them out there fighting a pit all day long. Coming in, everybody's enjoying themselves. They're just coming in covered in smoke and, whether they did a great job or not, and even if it's subpar, you catch yourself telling them, hey man, this is good, which is, kind of like the gentleman thing to do. You could be eating some of the worst food you've ever put in your mouth, but somebody put in the time, the effort, their love to it, whatever. You can't blame them, and maybe they just don't know, or that might be what their family likes. And if that is, then that's the case, whatever, but if they don't know how to do it, send them to my show. We'll help you out. But like I said, when you start rushing things, or you don't get your fire right, you don't get your smoke right, you don't get anything, you don't get your fire right, you don't tempt things, you don't let them rest, you don't, all these factors go into the final product of the meat. So I know you've been to a friend's house and they might have came up to you and be like, man, try these ribs, they're amazing. And then you take a bite of them and, need some work, probably could be a little bit better regardless. That's what I'm here for, to teach you the things that you probably have not had to deal with in the past. Or just didn't know that it was something to watch out for. So, going on with that, you got to understand the fire, that's the boss. Let me tell you something most folks won't. The meat is not the star. It's your fire. You mess up the fire, I don't care how expensive that brisket was, it's ruined. I don't chase temperature numbers like they owe me money. I watch the fire, we smell the smoke, we listen. The good smoke is thin and blue. Bad smoke, it looks like you're signaling for help. If your smoke smells bitter, sharp, or like a tire fire, congratulations, you're poisoning dinner. And no amount of sauce fixes stupid. You've got to understand that fire, that brisket, whatever you're cooking, it does not have the recipe. You have the recipe. You have the talent. You have the things that you need to build this meat and to make it into something succulent and good that people are going to want to eat. And if you don't get your fire down, it's going to kill your barbecue. It doesn't matter if you're cooking on a fire that is not ready to be cooked on. You might as well be cooking with tires instead of wood, because that's the flavor you're going to get. You have to let it burn down to get that thin blue smoke that you're looking for. I know growing up, my dad taught me how to barbecue, and I'm not going to mention a name, but, because I don't know if they're even still around. I don't know if they're still alive. I don't know, but I don't want this to get out, and I don't want to hurt their feelings. When I was a kid, we went to one of my grandparents' friend's house, and they smoked brisket for us because they knew they were coming into town or whatever. And as a kid, you got to understand, my dad could cook a brisket, and like I was a brisket snob all the way back down to young, because I knew what good brisket tasted like. And this gentleman and his wife made us brisket and stuff because they knew we were coming to visit, whatever. And I remember my dad telling me, like, man, brisket didn't taste bad, but I'll be belching smoke for 3 weeks, And, as I got older, I understood what he was talking about, is mainly because of his technique that he used, and his fire was not right. So it got a bunch of bad smoke on it. That's one of the first lessons I teach people, that I talk to about barbecue, when they're like, man, I love barbecue. I think I do okay, but man, I struggle on certain things. And one of the first things I would ask them was, what does your smoke look like? Anyways, so let's talk about the wood. Okay. There's different kinds of woods. This is probably the second most important thing in barbecue. Not just your fire management, not just your meat cuts, not all that, but let's talk about the wood, because it matters. Now listen close. Listen close. If you're just starting out, stop buying mystery wood. You can use post oak if you can get it. You can use pecan, mesquite, but don't get greedy with mesquite. Mesquite's like tequila. And what I mean by that is a little is fun, but too much ruins the night and makes people avoid you. And for the love of everything holy, do not soak your wood before you start barbecuing. Wet wood don't make smoke. It makes steam and regret. So I use mesquite a lot. I use mesquite, I use oak, I've used pecan, I've even used like peach and apple and all this other stuff. Me personally, I grew up in West Texas, so mesquite, that rules. That's my favorite. But when you start, if you ever get into like the competitions or, anything like that, you're going to have to start using some post oak or pecan or, you can use mesquite, but I'm telling you, mesquite is kind of like what I talked about earlier. You'll be belching smoke for 2 weeks or whatever if you don't do it right. I have done a lot of cooking in my past, catering events. I had a food truck for a little while. And one of the things that I had people come up and try our brisket, and they were like, hey, I love it because I can taste the smoke, but it's not overbearing. A lot of people don't realize, especially with mesquite, it's easy to get that heartburn, from the smoke. As we go along, I'm going to teach you tips and tricks on how to combat that. Like on my briskets and stuff like that, I use certain seasonings that combat that. So like if they get indigestion or whatever, use activated charcoal. There is a brand out there called Hardcore Carnivore that has a seasoning. It's called the black seasoning. It is activated charcoal, garlic powder, salt, and pepper. And I use that on every brisket I cook because of the amount of time that it sits in that smoke. I want it to combat the heartburn, the belching of the smoke, and plus with the way that I do it, it only gets so much smoke. It's only going to take in so much smoke. Once you get past that certain barrier of how much smoke your meat is taking, it is now to the point where it's no longer just a good piece of meat. It's almost like jerky, Okay. Now, the next thing, let's talk about your pits and you. Okay. So many different kinds of pits out there. And I've talked to people about their barbecue before, like what troubles they're having, this, that, and the other. This is something you got to understand. Your pit ain't broken. You are. You just don't know how to run it. Folks love to blame the smoker. My pit won't hold the temp. My smoker's running hot. My grill's just built wrong. No, it isn't. You just haven't learned it yet. Every pit has a personality. Some are calm, some are moody. Some need constant attention like a toddler on a sugar high. You gotta sit with it. You gotta learn where it runs hot. You gotta learn where it doesn't. You don't learn barbecue in one cook. You learn by screwing it up and then not doing that anymore. When I first started barbecuing, like I said, my dad taught me at a young age. We started with chicken, and his big deal was, "Oh, come doctor this chicken," like put the sauce on it, whatever, And to me, I thought I was cooking, man. I was like, I'm little kid, and I can cook chicken better than most men, And it's not that simple. It was so weird for me. Like when I first moved down on my own, one of the first things I did was bought me a grill, and I decided I was going to cook chicken and beans. I was going to make me a big pot of beans, cook me some chicken on the grill, whatever. Chicken turned out so-so. And I was just moving out on my own. I wasn't understanding, like, when my dad would make a pot of beans, it was like for the whole family, like aunts, uncles, cousins, all that. Well, so when I went to go make my first pot of beans, I cooked like 2 pounds of beans. And like for a whole week, man, it was like bean burritos, bean dip, refried beans. I mean, I did everything I could, and I still those beans still ended up going bad before I could eat them all. So, like I said, there's certain things you will learn as you go through it, and it's cool. It's cool to learn that stuff. Mistakes happen, you know. So, like I said, even some of the best cooks are going to have an off day. You know, I've done competition cooking for a long time, and there's some competitions I went in thinking, man, this is the best food I ever turned in, and not place. And then there's other cook-offs I went to where I'm sitting there trying it. I'm like, man, I don't know if I'd feed this to my dog, and then it ends up placing. So you never know what judges are doing. You never know whatever. So like I said, you know, with this, it's okay to make mistakes. That's how you're going to learn from it. Okay. Seasoning. Let's just talk about some seasoning. All right. You got to stop overthinking it. You know, let's start with talking about rubs. Here's a secret that most seasoning companies will get mad about: salt, pepper. That's it. Start out with your salt and peppers. Learn how to use those to your advantage in the meats, whether it be pork, beef, chicken, fish, it don't matter. Find out how much salt you need for it, how much pepper it is. That's it. Because if you can't make good barbecue with just salt and pepper, and paprika, 12 secrets from the internet, ain't going to save you. Season it like you mean it. Don't just dust it. Commit to it. If you're scared of seasoning, you're scared of flavor. A lot of these people that you see on the internet and everything else, you know, their briskets have these beautiful barks. Beautiful barks. Part of that is from the smoke. Part of that is from keeping the brisket moist with spritzes, or some people do mop sauces or whatever. But what helps that bark set really well is 16 mesh black pepper. That's it. The better that the brisket is seasoned with the salt and pepper and letting it draw. Like I use kosher salt. Okay, when you season kosher salt, it's a pickling agent. Kosher, think of kosher pickles. It's a pickling agent. So what happens is when you put that kosher salt on a piece of meat, whether it be a steak, brisket, beef ribs, whatever, once you put that on there, it's going to draw a lot of moisture from the inside of that meat. And when it hits that kosher salt, it's going to make kind of a crust, a film, if you will. And when it does that, that's when you're locking in your flavor. So when you go to put that steak or that brisket or whatever on the pit, if you rested the brisket long enough after you seasoned it, you should have a good coat of that on the brisket, of the seasoning on the brisket before it ever goes on the pit. And then when it comes on there, when it goes onto the pit, you're watching your temps. You're not getting any flare-ups because you got your fire right. You got the good thin blue smoke coming out. Your temps where you need it. When that smoke starts rolling in on top of that meat, and you have this film, so to speak, or, you know, this protective layer of kosher salt and, you know, the meat juice, that is going to change colors with the smoke, and it's going to give it that beautiful bark that you need. So I'm telling you, salt and pepper, get that down. And like I said, if you got somebody in your family that has, you know, like that has to eat a bunch of Nexium before they can even eat brisket, use the hardcore carnivore black, you know, the activated charcoal, and plus it makes your bark look really, really black and good, you know, not burnt. There's a difference between burnt and bark, but we'll get into that as we go. Speaking of briskets, let's just hit on it for a little bit, okay? Brisket is a great humility check. Brisket is Brisket's the meat that's going to teach you patience. It doesn't care about your schedule. It doesn't care about dinner time. It doesn't care that your guests are hungry. Brisket's done when it's done. If you cook brisket for time instead of fuel, you're gambling, and the house usually wins. Probe it. When it slides in like warm butter, you're close. If it fight back, leave it alone. Barbecue rewards patience and punishes arrogance. So, speaking of this brisket, and I don't know how many times growing up, my dad would be out cooking a brisket. We'd have a house full of people, and it's getting late. People are wanting to eat and go home. You know, been playing all day, been, swimming or whatever, and this brisket's been rolling all day long. You're smelling it in the backyard as you're swimming, and you get out of the pool, you dry off, you get all this stuff done, man, you're ready to eat. And my mom would always go out and be like, hey, is brisket ready yet? Nope. Well, so-and-so's here and they're wanting to leave. Okay, well, brisket's not ready. I'll get to it when I get to it. It'll get finished when it gets finished. And I remember as a kid, I was like, man, this brisket looks good already, Dad, let's go. But I will tell you this. I've never had a bad brisket from my dad. And a lot of it is because he has the patience. He has all the patience, man. I'm telling you. So the reason why briskets have such a long cook time, a lot of times, there's something called a stall. It's not a problem, but it's a stall. You're going to hear about it. That's when the meat stops climbing in temperature and it makes you panic. Don't. It's just science going on inside, okay? The moisture of the meat, of the brisket, is evaporating. The heat is balancing. You didn't mess up. You just got to wait it out. Most barbecue gets ruined right here when folks get nervous and start fiddling with stuff. Every time you open that lid, you're setting yourself back. If you can't trust the process, you shouldn't be barbecuing. Okay? So when you hit that stall, I've seen people like, oh, I'm going to power through the stall. I'm going to do this. And, they're bumping up temps and they're messing with the whole thing. You don't have to do that. If you just let science do what it does, because what happens is that meat's got moisture in it. And when it starts to evaporate, it is cooling off the meat as it comes out, because it's colder on the inside of that brisket. So as that starts coming out, evaporating, it's cooling the brisket down. So until it gets to the point where that brisket is the same temperature of the steam that's getting evaporated out of it, until it levels out, it's not going to go no further, because you're actually cooling your brisket off with the steam having the stall. So, like I said, don't freak out. That's where a lot of people think, oh, man, I'm good. Man, I've had some briskets hit a stall like maybe 10 minutes. I've had briskets that hit a stall for 2 hours. I mean, it just depends, and it goes back to your trimming, too. Like, we're not even getting into the whole trimming part yet. But, like, there's fat on a brisket that just will not render. Like your deckle, it is not going to render. It is going to be a chunk of fat, and it's not going to be good. I am one that loves fatty brisket. I think that the flavor is locked into that fat. And so I don't over trim my briskets to where they're dry, but I also don't want to be eating and get a big old plug of nothing but fat. So anyways, let's go on. So with all that being said, let's talk about spritzes, wrapping, and other arguments. People love to argue about spritzing, full versus butcher paper, fat up, fat down. Here's the truth. There is not one right way, but there's plenty of wrong ones. Spritz if it helps your bark, like what we talked about. Wrap if it's drying out. Don't wrap if it ain't. Pay attention. Barbecue ain't rules. It's responses. Okay. Me personally, when I start talking about brisket, I use a spritz mainly on competition but in the backyard, not really. Usually I spritz with apple cider vinegar and a little water, or I've even spritzed with apple juice and a little bit of water. And I've done apple juice with Louisiana hot sauce as well, which is really good, but spritzing is all up to you. I do it because I want to help set my bark. And I want to keep my meat moist during the first few hours of cooking, because that's when things are going to take place to help make the flavor for the rest of the cook. So I do spritz a little bit towards the beginning, especially the first 2 or 3 hours. Wrapping, I wrap in butcher paper and foil. I do the butcher paper, so when I wrap it, and it starts to, like we were just talking about, and it starts to evaporate the brisket juice, which brisket juice is nothing but straight grease. So when it starts coming out and it's just hitting foil, it's evaporating and burning every time, because that foil's hot. But if you have it wrapped in the butcher paper, when it expels, it hits the paper and it soaks into the paper, and then it acts as like a shield to the actual foil, so you're not losing all your good stuff. So that's just my opinion. I know my dad, he was real big into foil. I still use foil, like on my ribs and stuff like that. But brisket, I do butcher paper and foil. Foil helps me get the heat that I want using the foil, but the butcher paper helps keep from losing all my juices, basically. So another thing, if you make it through the stall, you make it through everything, you're probing right and everything. Here's another thing where people fell at. Resting. Listen real close. If you slice your meat right off the pit, you deserve dry barbecue. You have to let it rest. Let it calm down. Let those juices redistribute inside the meat. I know you're excited. I know you smell good, and it smells good. Wait anyway. Good barbecue ain't rushed at the end. This was a hard lesson for me to learn, especially when I was coming up through the ranks. When I started doing cook-offs and I started cooking for my family and stuff like that. Like I told you earlier, my mom would come out and ask my dad, is brisket ready, brisket ready, brisket ready? I got to where if I was serving brisket, I would cook it the day before and rest it inside of a cooler and then slice it the next day. And man, the results were, big difference. If you don't let those juices redistribute, okay, think about a sponge. It's just, you take a sponge and you squeeze it, dip your hand in water with the sponge, you bring it out, you let it go, you don't have no water, right? You take that sponge and you dunk it in the water, let it get soaked, and you bring it out, you got the juice, right? Well, when you bring that thing out, it's hot, it's the juices, like I said, are trying to escape because of the cooking, all this other stuff. Well, there's a lot going on. It's like somebody got in a tight grip, Well, if you let it rest, that grip loosens up. When that grip loosens up, the juices start coming back into the brisket. Resting is just as important as the cook. And like I said, if you slice it right off the pit, you deserve that dry barbecue because you did not take the time to let it rest. In the past, I've done this. Don't use your wife's good towels. I found that out the hard way. But you pull the brisket off. It's wrapped in the foil and the butcher paper, wrap it up in a towel and then put it in a cooler and let it set. And when you open that thing up, it's still going to be nice and hot, warm, and everything soaked back in. But don't use your wife's good towels. It got me in trouble once or twice. But anyways, I digress. This isn't about me. I'm trying to teach you. So I guess one of the reasons why I love barbecue is I'm one of those people that love real. You know, I don't like women to wear too much makeup. I like real. I like natural. I like good, natural things. One of the reasons why I love barbecue is you can't fake it. You're either good, you can cook barbecue or you can't. There's no in between. There's some people that are better at certain cuts of meat, are better at, maybe great at brisket but can't do ribs. And some people may be great at ribs that brisket intimidates them, or they can't get past the stall, or they don't let it rest, or whatever, If you show up distracted, it shows in the meat. You get impatient, it shows. You cut corners, everybody's going to taste it. Barbecue will teach you to slow down, pay attention, and respect the process. Funny thing is, life is kind of the same way. If you rush things, you rush into a relationship, usually don't work. You don't pay attention, you could lose your job. You could lose everything if you don't pay attention. Respect the process of it, Sometimes it's going to be harder. Sometimes it's going to be easier. You just got to respect it. My dad says this all the time. You take 100 people, tell them cook me a brisket. You're going to get 100 different recipes. They're going to look different. They're going to taste different. They're going to be different textures, tenderness, everything. Are all of them good? Could be. But that's what I'm saying is like there's no right or wrong way, but there's no certain way that's going to be good every time. But like I said, there's no right way, but there's a lot of wrong ways, and you got to figure it out. So in closing, if today's your first cook or your 100th, remember this. Fire don't lie. Smoke tells the truth. Patience always wins. This is Smokin with Gary. Next time we'll dig deeper. Specific cuts, fire control tricks, how to recover when things go sideways. Until then, tend your fire, trust your instincts, and don't rush something that deserves time.